Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I should have known better than to buy used furniture. The price tag of $50 for a solid oak dresser seemed too good to be true. It was. The first weird thing happened the night I brought it home. I was unpacking some clothes to put in the dresser when all the lights in my apartment flickered. Just once. Quick, like someone flipping a switch. I checked the breaker box. Everything looked normal. I went back to unpacking. The dresser had 6 drawers, all lined with this old yellowed paper that smelled like mothballs and cigarettes. I started pulling out the paper. That's when I found the photograph stuck to the bottom of the top drawer. Black and white, probably from the 1950s. A woman standing next to this same dresser. She wasn't smiling. I tossed the photo in the trash. Should have kept it. That first night I woke up at exactly 3 a.m., not 2:59, not 3:01. The red numbers on my alarm clock said 3 banger. My room felt cold. Really cold. I could see my breath. The maintenance guy had told me the heating system was old, so I grabbed another blanket and went back to sleep. The next morning, I got ready for work like normal. Opened the top drawer to get some socks. Stopped. Stared. The yellowed paper lining I had thrown away was back in the drawer. All of it. Even the photo. I checked the trash can. Empty. The cleaning service wouldn't come until Friday and I lived alone. I ran late to work that day because I spent 20 minutes searching my apartment for the old paper and photo I knew I had thrown away. Never found them. The next few nights followed the same pattern. Wake up at 3 a.m. Room cold enough to see my breath. But now I was hearing things too. The sound of drawer runners sliding on wood. I'd check the dresser every time. All drawers closed. 5 nights after buying the dresser, I woke up at 3 a.m. again. This time was different. All 6 drawers were open, not just a little. Fully extended. The kind of thing that takes deliberate effort. I sat up in bed. My heart pounded against my ribs. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. The street light outside my window cast enough light to see into the drawers. Empty. I had emptied them the day before, moved all my clothes to the closet. The drawers slammed shut, all at once. The bang made me jump. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Nothing looked out of place. The dresser stood there like any normal piece of furniture. I walked over and checked each drawer. Closed tight. That old paper lining still inside. And the photo. I picked up the photo again. Looked closer this time. The woman wore a dress with a floral pattern. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her face had this hard look. Behind her, the dresser sat in what looked like a bedroom. A mirror hung above it. In the mirror's reflection, a dark figure stood in the doorway. I dropped the photo. It fluttered under the dresser. When I got down on my hands and knees to retrieve it, the photo was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Sat in my living room with all the lights on, watching YouTube videos on my phone to stay awake. When the sun came up, I called in sick to work. I spent the morning researching the thrift store where I'd bought the dresser. Found their phone number and called. Hey, yeah, I bought a dresser from you guys last week. Oak, 6 drawers. I was wondering if you knew where it came from. The woman who answered sounded bored. We get donations all the time. Don't really keep track. This one came in last Tuesday. Big dresser, probably from the 50s. Papers shuffled on her end. Oh yeah, estate sale stuff. Whole house full of furniture. Owner died, no family. That's all I know. I asked for the address where the estate sale happened. She wasn't supposed to give it out, but I mentioned the weird things happening and she took pity on me. The house was across town. Small place, brick, overgrown yard. For sale sign in the front window. I knocked on the neighbor's door. An old man answered. Took some convincing, but he told me about the previous owner. Martha Kendrick. Lived alone for 40 years after her husband disappeared. Died in her sleep 2 months ago. Disappeared? I asked. The old man nodded. Back in '53. Police investigated, but never found anything. Martha always said he left her, but nobody believed that. She changed after he vanished. Became mean. Kept to herself. I showed him the photo on my phone. I'd taken a picture of it before it vanished under the dresser. His eyes widened. "That's Martha. Where'd you get this?" "The dresser in the photo. I bought it from the thrift store." He stared at the photo. "Something wrong with that dresser?" "Martha used to talk to it sometimes, late at night. We could hear her through the walls, arguing with someone who wasn't there." I went home and pulled up newspaper archives on my laptop. Found an article from September 1953. "Local man missing. Police suspect foul play." The article mentioned Harold Kendrick, Martha's husband, last seen at home. No signs of forced entry. No body ever found. That night I didn't even try to sleep. Sat in my bedroom watching the dresser. At 2:59 a.m. the temperature dropped. I could see my breath again. 3 a.m. The drawers opened slowly, one at a time, from top to bottom. The sound of wood sliding on wood filled the room. A voice whispered from the direction of the dresser. Female. Angry. "You shouldn't have bought it." My whole body shook. I wanted to run but couldn't move. The drawers slammed shut, one by one, top to bottom. Bang, 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 bang. Then they started opening again. Faster this time. The voice got louder. "This is mine. He's mine." Another voice joined in. Male, muffled, like speaking through a wall. "Help me." The drawers slammed faster. Open, shut, open, shut. The voices argued, overlapped. The female voice screamed. The male voice begged. I ran, grabbed my keys and phone. Spent the night in my car in the Walmart parking lot. When I returned in the morning, the dresser stood quietly against the wall. Drawers closed. I opened each one slowly. The lining paper was gone. The photo sat in the top drawer. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Really looked at it. At the figure in the mirror. A man in a suit. His face turned away from the camera. I flipped the photo over. Faded handwriting on the back. Harold and Martha Kendrick, September 15th, 1953. The day before he disappeared. The photo slipped from my fingers. Floated down to land face up on the floor. The figure in the mirror had turned. Now faced the camera. Harold Kendrick's face was twisted in terror. I sold my nice TV and bought a better one. Sold my leather couch and got a new one. But that dresser? I couldn't give it away. Couldn't sell it. Couldn't let someone else buy it not knowing what came with it. I rented a storage unit instead. Moved the dresser there. Changed the lock 3 times because it kept breaking. Every month I get a bill for the storage unit. Every month I pay it. Sometimes I drive by late at night. The light in my unit is always on, even though I never installed one. Sometimes I hear voices arguing when I drive past. A woman's angry shouts. A man's muffled pleas. I keep paying the bill. It's cheaper than therapy. Cheaper than the guilt I'd feel if I let someone else buy that dresser. The local paper ran a story last week about Martha Kendrick's old house. New owners renovating. Found something in the walls. Human bones. Male. Dated to the 1950s. They identified them through dental records. Harold Kendrick. The dresser's still in that storage unit, still locked up. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up at exactly 3 a.m. My apartment feels cold. I see my breath in the air. And I wonder if some things can't be locked away. If some kinds of evil seep through walls and doors and locks. I wonder if Martha Kendrick is still arguing with her husband. Still keeping him close, even after death. I wonder if she knows they found him. I wonder if she cares. The storage facility called yesterday. Something about a broken lock. Again. I haven't gone to check it yet. I'm not sure I want to know if the dresser is still there. I first saw him on October 12th. The date sticks because it was my birthday, and I was walking home late from drinks with coworkers. The old Victorian house stood like it always did on Cedar Street, dark windows covered with weathered boards. But something was different that night. Movement caught my eye. A shape in the upstairs window, barely visible through a gap in the planks. I stopped walking. A man stood there, completely still, staring down at me, just watching. The streetlight didn't reach up that high, but I could make out his outline. Tall, thin, motionless. My skin prickled. He didn't move or try to hide when I spotted him. He just kept staring. I hurried past, my footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. That house had been abandoned for years. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that. The bank foreclosed on it back in 2019, and it had been empty ever since. Teenagers sometimes broke in to drink or spray paint the walls, but the police always chased them out. The next morning, I told myself I'd imagined it. Too many birthday beers. But as I walked to work, I looked up at that window again. He was there. Same position, same stillness. Just watching the street below. My heart started pounding. I crossed to the other side of the street and picked up my pace. The whole time I felt his eyes following me. That night after work, I drove by instead of walking. The man was still at the window. I slowed down to get a better look. His shape was clearer in the early evening light. Dark clothes, pale face, completely motionless, like a statue. I rolled past at 5 mph, craning my neck. He didn't react at all, just kept staring straight ahead like he was waiting for something. The next day, I called the police non-emergency line. "There's someone squatting in the old Marshall house on Cedar," I said. "I've seen him watching from the upstairs window multiple times now." "We'll send a car to check it out," the dispatcher said. I watched from my parked car as 2 officers approached the house an hour later. They shined flashlights through the boards on the first floor windows. One of them tried the front door, then walked around back. After about 10 minutes, they left. The dispatcher called me back. Officers found no signs of entry or disturbance. All doors and windows are still securely boarded up. No one inside. "But I saw him," I insisted. "He's there right now, in the front window on the second floor." "Sir, they checked thoroughly. The house is empty and sealed. Would you like to file a formal report?" I hung up. The man continued his silent vigil in the window. Days passed. Every morning and evening, he was there. I started taking photos with my phone, but they just showed a dark shape behind the boards, not clear enough to prove anything. I asked my neighbor Ted about it. He'd lived on the street for 30 years. "That place has been empty since the Marshalls lost it," he said. "Bank can't sell it because of all the structural issues. Foundations shot, roofs caving in. Nobody's been in there for years except some kids now and then. But there's someone up there now," I said. "I see him every day." Ted squinted at the house. "Don't see anyone. You sure your eyes aren't playing tricks?" I showed him the photos on my phone. He shrugged. "Just shadows, looks like. Place is all sealed up tight. Nobody could get in there without breaking boards off, and those are all intact." But I knew what I was seeing. The man never moved from his post, never shifted position, never reacted when I stared back at him, just watched. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that dark figure waiting at the window. What did he want? Why didn't he ever leave? After 2 weeks, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on in there. I waited until 2 a.m. on a moonless night. The street was deserted. I parked a block away and walked to the house carrying a crowbar and flashlight. The man was still at his post, a darker shadow among shadows. The back door had 3 boards nailed across it. I pried them off as quietly as possible, wincing at every creak and snap. The door itself was locked, but the wood around the handle was rotted. One good shove with my shoulder and it gave way. Stale air hit me as I stepped inside. My flashlight beam showed peeling wallpaper, water stains, fallen ceiling tiles. The kitchen floor was littered with dead leaves and empty beer cans. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed to the second floor. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. Dust swirled in the flashlight beam. I reached the landing. The door to the front room stood half open. I could see the boarded-up window where the man always stood. But the room was empty. I swept my light around. Bare floors, crumbling plaster walls, cobwebs in the corners. No furniture, no signs anyone had been there recently. I approached the window. The boards were firmly in place, undisturbed. No gaps big enough for anyone to look through. A thick layer of dust covered the windowsill. Something caught my eye, a darker patch on the floor below the window. I knelt down for a closer look. Footprints in the dust. 2 parallel tracks, like someone had stood in the same spot for a very long time. The floorboards creaked behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. For a split second I saw him. Tall, thin, pale face, dark clothes. Standing perfectly still in the doorway. Then the flashlight flickered and died. I lunged for the door, but hit solid wall instead. Disoriented, I stumbled backwards. My hands found the window boards. I pulled desperately, but they wouldn't budge. A cold breeze brushed past my face. The air temperature plummeted. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling as I turned on its light. The room was empty again. But now I stood exactly where I'd seen the footprints, directly in front of the window. An urge came over me, impossible to resist. I turned to face the glass. Through gaps in the boards, I could see the street below. A perfect view of the sidewalk where I walked every day. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. My body felt frozen in place, arms at my sides, head fixed forward. A man hurried past on the sidewalk below, glancing nervously up at the window. I recognized him. It was me from 2 weeks ago, the night I first saw the figure in the window. I tried to call out, to wave, to warn myself, but I couldn't make a sound, couldn't move a muscle. I could only watch. Days passed, weeks. I lost count. People walked by below. Joggers, dog walkers, parents with strollers. Sometimes they looked up. Most didn't. I saw myself pass every morning and evening. Watched as I took photos with my phone. Saw myself park across the street to stake out the house. I knew what was coming next. Knew I would break in tonight, climb the stairs, enter this room. Any minute now, I would arrive. And then I would take my place at the window, watching, waiting, just as the one before me had waited for me. Just as I now waited for the next. Through the gaps in the boards, I saw headlights cut through darkness. A car parking a block away. A figure with a crowbar moving through shadows toward the back door. I stood perfectly still, watching, waiting. Footsteps creaked on the stairs below. My hands shake as I write this. I need to get it down before I forget the details, before I start doubting myself again. The police won't listen. My wife thinks I need help. Maybe I do. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I need someone to understand why I can't take the 8:45 train home anymore. It started 3 months ago. I'd just switched to the late shift at the accounting firm. The overtime paid better, and Janet needed the extra money for her mom's medical bills. The commute wasn't bad. Fewer people. Quieter. You gotta know the regulars. He got on at Canal Street. Every night, same time, 10:32. Worn brown suit, probably 10 years old. Scuffed shoes, a felt hat with a small tear in the brim. He'd shuffle to the same seat, 3rd row from the back, window side. Eyes closed before he even sat down. Never moved. Never spoke. The first week I barely noticed him. Just another tired commuter heading home. But then I started seeing the way he watched me. It was subtle at first. I'd get off at my stop in Queens, and just as I stepped onto the platform, I'd feel something. A prickling on the back of my neck. When I turned to look at the train, there he was, eyes wide open, staring directly at me through the window. Not just looking, staring, like he knew me, like he was trying to tell me something. I started paying more attention. His suit never changed. The same brown fabric worn shiny at the elbows, the same loose thread hanging from his right cuff, the same yellowed shirt collar. His hat stayed on, even when he appeared to sleep. One night, I decided to count the minutes his eyes stayed closed. 2 hours and 13 minutes. Nobody sleeps that perfectly still. No head bobbing, no shifting, no response to the screeching brakes or announcement chimes. After 3 weeks, I changed seats to get a better look at him. I noticed his hands. They never moved from his lap. Pale fingers interlaced. No wedding ring. No watch. No briefcase or bag. Nothing to mark him as someone heading home from work. The staring got worse, more intense. His eyes would lock onto mine through the window, following me as the train pulled away. One night, I swear I saw him smile. Just a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, but it made my stomach turn. I started taking photos with my phone. Subtle shots, pretending to check messages. But when I looked at them later, his face was always blurred. Just that brown suit and hat, clear as day. But where his face should be, nothing but a smear of pixels. Janet found the photos. "You're obsessing," she said. "It's just some old man on your train. Maybe he recognizes you from somewhere." But I knew that wasn't it. The way he looked at me, it wasn't recognition. It was anticipation. I tried changing cars. He always appeared in mine. I tried taking earlier trains, later trains. He was always there, getting on at Canal Street at 10:32. I started losing sleep. At work, I'd catch myself staring at spreadsheets, seeing his face in the columns of numbers. My boss noticed, called me in for a talk about focus and performance. Last week, I finally broke. I had to know. When he got on at Canal Street, I watched him take his usual seat, waited 10 minutes. Then I got up and walked over. "Excuse me," I said. No response. "Sir, I see you every night. Do I know you from somewhere?" His eyes stayed closed, not a flicker of movement. I reached out to touch his shoulder. My hand passed through the fabric of his suit like it was smoke. Cold air hit my fingers and I jerked back. He opened his eyes. They were my eyes, my face, but older, much older, worn and lined and tired. The suit was mine too, the one I'm wearing now, aged by decades of use. I stumbled backward, fell into someone's lap. When I looked up again, his seat was empty. I ran off at the next stop, took a taxi home, called in sick the next day and the next. Yesterday, I forced myself to go back to work. Had to. Can't afford to lose this job. Took a different route home. Doubled my commute time, but I couldn't face that train again. As I waited for my connection at Jamaica Station, I saw him. Not on a train this time. Standing on the platform across from me. Same suit, same hat, same face. My face. He raised his hand in greeting. The station security footage shows nothing. Just me, staring across at an empty platform. I'm writing this at my kitchen table. It's 10:15 p.m. Janet's asleep upstairs. In 17 minutes, he'll be getting on a train at Canal Street. I know because I can feel it, like a tugging behind my ribs. The suit I'm wearing now, I've had it 3 years. The thread on the right cuff is starting to come loose. There's a small wear spot forming on the left elbow. Tomorrow I'm burning it, but I know that won't be enough, because I finally understand what he's trying to tell me. Every night on that train, for who knows how many years, he's been waiting, watching, warning. I see the pattern now. The overtime hours, the extra money we need, the long commutes getting longer, the slow wearing down of fabric and flesh. I know why he looks at me that way when I leave the train, why his stare follows me onto the platform. He's watching another version of himself walk away, again and again and again. Time isn't a straight line. Sometimes it loops back on itself, like train tracks circling the city. Sometimes we get caught in those loops, wearing the same paths until we forget how to walk any other way. I called my boss an hour ago, told him I'm quitting. Taking that job offer in Boston Janet's been pushing me to consider. The pay is less, but we'll manage. Because I know what happens if I don't. I've seen it worn and tired and riding the 10:32 from Canal Street. Night after night after night, my hands have stopped shaking. The tugging behind my ribs is gone. I think, just maybe, I've broken the loop. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel wool fabric wearing thin beneath my fingers. Still smell the metal and electricity of the subway tunnels. Still see my own eyes staring back at me through a train window, filled with a sadness I'm only now beginning to understand. And I wonder, how many other versions of me are out there, riding through the dark, trying to warn themselves before it's too late? I won't be one of them, not anymore. Tomorrow we start packing for Boston, and I'm taking the bus to work. The rain started at 10 p.m. I wasn't supposed to work tonight. Johnson called in sick at the last minute, so here I am, stuck on the graveyard shift at Riverside Parking. 3 underground levels of concrete and fluorescent lights. I've done this job for 6 years. Nothing ever happens here. Tonight was different. The security office sits above ground level. 6 monitors show feeds from the cameras mounted throughout the garage. The night shift is easy. Watch the screens, do hourly walkthroughs, fill out the log. Most nights I read or play games on my phone between rounds. The rain drums against the windows. Water trickles down from somewhere in the ceiling, dripping into a bucket in the corner. Plunk, plunk, plunk. The sound gets on my nerves after a while. I check my watch. 1:15 a.m. Time for another walkthrough. I glance at the monitors before heading down. Level 1 is half full, mostly monthly permit holders who leave their cars overnight. Level 2 is nearly empty. Level 3 has just 3 cars scattered across the far end. Standard for a Tuesday night. Something moves on monitor 3. I lean closer to the screen. A dark shape slides between 2 cars on level 2. My hand freezes on the desk. The shape is gone as quickly as it appeared. Could be a glitch in the feed. These cameras are old. I rewind the footage. There, at 1:16:42. The shape passes from left to right, staying low to the ground. Too fast to make out any details. Too dark to be a person. Too solid to be a shadow cast by headlights. My throat feels tight. I grab my flashlight and radio. The weight of them in my hands is reassuring. Standard procedure is to investigate any unusual activity. I've done this hundreds of times, usually just teenagers trying to sneak in or homeless people looking for shelter. This feels different. The stairwell door clangs shut behind me. My footsteps echo off concrete walls. The emergency lights cast a sickly green glow. Level 1 is quiet. A few puddles have formed where water seeps through the ceiling. The air smells like wet asphalt and exhaust. Level 2 is darker. Half the fluorescent tubes are burnt out. Shadows pool in the corners. I sweep my flashlight beam across empty parking spaces. Nothing moves. The ventilation system hums. Water drips somewhere in the distance. My radio crackles. Static. I adjust the volume. More static than silence. Probably interference from the concrete walls. This happens sometimes during storms. I check between each car, marking off sections in my head. Row A clear, row B clear. My palms are sweaty on the flashlight grip. Row C clear. The beam catches something at the end of row D. A puddle of water reflects the light back at me. Nothing else. The temperature seems to drop with each step deeper into the garage. My breath fogs in front of my face. That's not normal for August, even underground. Goosebumps rise on my arms. A sound behind me, like something sliding across concrete. I spin around. The flashlight beam cuts through empty air. My heart pounds against my ribs. Sweat runs down my back despite the cold. Security, I call out. Anyone here? My voice sounds thin and weak. The garage swallows it up. Another sound, closer now. A soft scraping, like rubber soles on pavement. Or something else dragging itself along the floor. I turn again, slower this time. Nothing but shadows between the support columns. My radio erupts in a burst of static. I nearly drop it. Through the white noise, I hear something that might be words, might be breathing, might be neither. To hell with this. I'm going back upstairs to call for backup. I walk quickly toward the stairwell, forcing myself not to run. The flashlight beam bounces with each step. Shadows leap and dance on the walls. The stairwell door seems farther away than before. My footsteps sound wrong, like there's an echo just slightly out of sync, like something following just a few steps behind. Don't look back. Don't run. Almost there. I reach for the door handle. The metal is ice cold against my palm. Behind me, the scraping sound gets louder. Closer. My fingers fumble with the handle. The door opens with a metallic shriek. I take the stairs 2 at a time. The echo of footsteps continues behind me. Not quite matching my pace, not quite human. I burst through the door into the security office, slam it shut, lock it. For a long moment, I just stand there breathing hard. Sweat soaks through my uniform shirt. My hands shake as I set down the flashlight and radio. The monitors show empty parking spaces. No movement, no shadows, just concrete and cars and flickering fluorescent lights. I drop into my chair, legs weak with relief. Movement on monitor 4 catches my eye, the same dark shape from before. It's in the stairwell now, closer to the camera, closer to me. The image isn't clear, but I can make out more details. It's roughly human-sized, but the proportions are wrong. Too tall, too thin. The edges blur and shift like smoke, but the center is solid darkness, darker than any shadow should be. It moves in a way that hurts my eyes to watch. Like each frame of motion skips and jerks. The shape reaches the top of the stairs, stops, turns toward the camera. The screen fills with static for a second. When it clears, the shape is gone. My phone is in my hand before I consciously reach for it. No signal. The screen shows only a spinning circle where the bars should be. I try the landline on the desk. Dead silence. Not even a dial tone. The rain pounds harder against the windows. Water runs down the glass in sheets, distorting the view of the empty parking lot outside. The bucket in the corner overflows. The dripping sounds different now. Heavier, more deliberate. Plunk, plunk, plunk. I don't want to turn around. My body moves anyway, rotating the chair slowly toward the corner. The bucket is full of something too dark to be water, too thick. It drips from the ceiling in fat black drops. The fluorescent lights flicker once, twice, then go out. Emergency lights kick on, bathing the room in that sickly green glow. The monitors stay dark. In the reflection of the black screens, I see it. The shape stands in the corner where the bucket was. Taller now. The edges still smoke and blur, but I can see what might be a face. What might be eyes. What might be a mouth opening wider than any mouth should. My body won't move. Can't move. The air feels thick, like trying to breathe underwater. The shape slides forward. No footsteps. No sound except the rain and my heartbeat and that wet dripping. Plunk, plunk, plunk. It reaches for me with something that might be a hand. Fingers too long, too many joints. The emergency lights flicker. In that stuttering green glow, I see what it really looks like. What it really is. I scream. The sound tears out of my throat, raw and animal. The shape lunges forward. The lights go out completely. They found me the next morning when the day shift arrived. I was curled under the desk, clothes soaked with sweat, voice gone from screaming. The security footage showed nothing, just empty halls and static. The bucket in the corner was bone dry. I quit that day. Found a new job working days at a warehouse across town. I don't do night shifts anymore. Can't handle being alone in the dark. Sometimes when it rains, I think I hear that dripping sound. Plunk, plunk, plunk. I don't look in the corners of rooms anymore. Don't check reflections in dark windows or screens. Don't want to see what might be looking back, but I know it's still out there. Still hunting. Still hungry. And sometimes late at night when the rain drums against my windows, I wonder if it followed me home. I can't sleep anymore. Not since that night on Route 50 in Nevada. I keep seeing her in my mind. That woman standing perfectly still by the roadside, staring into the darkness. I should have stopped. Should have checked if she needed help. But something felt wrong. Really wrong. Let me tell you exactly what happened. I drive that stretch of Route 50 twice a week for work, hauling industrial supplies between Ely and Carson City. They call it the loneliest road in America for a reason. Nothing but sagebrush, dirt, and mountains for hundreds of miles. Most nights I don't see another car for hours. It was Thursday, October 12th. Clear night, quarter moon. The dashboard clock showed 11:47 p.m. when I first saw her. My headlights caught something pale by the shoulder about 50 yards ahead. As I got closer, I saw it was a woman in a white dress. She stood completely motionless, facing the empty desert, back turned to the road. I slowed down to about 40, checking my mirrors out of habit. No other cars in sight, just endless dark highway behind me. The woman didn't move or try to flag me down, didn't even turn her head as my truck rumbled past. Just kept staring into the blackness like she was watching something out there. My hands tightened on the wheel. The route had its share of weird stuff. Abandoned cars, random hitchhikers, even the occasional cult gathering out in the desert. But something about this felt different. The woman's stillness bothered me. People in trouble move around, wave their arms, try to get attention. They don't just stand there like statues. I grabbed my phone to call Highway Patrol, but no signal. Typical for that section. I considered stopping, but my delivery schedule was tight. And honestly, the whole scene gave me the creeps. I figured she probably had a car nearby, maybe waiting for someone. I'd check on my return trip in a few hours. The rest of the drive to Carson City was normal. Made my delivery on time. Grabbed coffee and a sandwich at the 24-hour diner I always stop at. Headed back east around 3 a.m. My truck's headlights cut through the darkness as I approached the same stretch of road. The night had gotten colder. The temperature gauge showed 42 degrees. I slowed down as I neared the spot where I'd seen her, expecting it to be empty. She was still there. Exactly the same position. Same white dress. Same rigid posture. Same fixed stare into the desert, like she hadn't moved a muscle in 3 hours. My stomach clenched. The air in the cab felt suddenly thick. This wasn't right. Nobody stands motionless for hours in the cold desert night. I pulled over about 100 yards past her, gravel crunching under my tires. I sat there, engine idling, watching in my side mirror. She didn't react to my truck, didn't turn, didn't move at all. "This is stupid," I muttered, reaching for the door handle. I needed to check if she was okay, but my hand was shaking. I opened the door. The desert night hit me with a blast of cold air. My boots crunched on the gravel shoulder as I walked toward her. The only sounds were my footsteps and the low rumble of my truck's engine. 50 feet away now, still no movement from her. Her dress was simple, knee-length, no patterns. Long dark hair hung straight down her back. Her arms hung at her sides. 30 feet. My throat felt dry. Something about her stance seemed wrong. Too perfect. Too still. 20 feet. My flashlight beam played across her back. The dress was dirty, stained with something dark around the edges. 10 feet. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the silence. "Ma'am?" My voice came out hoarse. "You okay? Need any help?" Nothing. Not even a twitch. 5 feet away. My hand reached out toward her shoulder. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance. I jumped, heart pounding. When I looked back, she was facing me. I didn't see her turn. Didn't hear any movement. 1 second she was facing the desert. The next, she was staring right at me. But wrong. All wrong. Her face was gray. Not pale, but the color of concrete. Her eyes were black holes, no whites visible. Her mouth hung open at an impossible angle, jaw distended like a snake's. The dress wasn't white anymore. It was covered in dark stains that looked black in my flashlight beam. I ran, faster than I've ever run in my life. Scrambled into my truck cab, slammed the door, threw it in drive. The tires spun on gravel before catching. I floored it. The mirror showed empty road behind me. Just darkness where she had been. My hands shook so bad I could barely keep the wheel straight. Cold sweat soaked my shirt. I drove 90 miles an hour until I hit the next town. I called Highway Patrol once I had phone service. Gave them the mile marker, described what I saw. The dispatcher took the information politely, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Probably thought I was drunk or high. They sent a car out to check. Found nothing. No footprints in the gravel. No signs anyone had been there. I've made that run 12 times since then. Always in daylight now. I keep thinking about those black eyes. That wrong, twisted face. But mostly I think about those 3 hours she stood there perfectly still, staring into nothing. What was she watching out there in the desert? What was she waiting for? Sometimes when I drive that stretch, I think I see something white by the roadside up ahead. Just for a second. Then it's gone. But I never slow down anymore. Never stop. I finally told my wife last week, after another sleepless night. She suggested trauma counseling. Maybe she's right. But I know what I saw. Yesterday I requested a transfer to the Reno-Salt Lake City route. It's a longer drive, worse pay. But it doesn't pass through that empty stretch of Route 50. I can't face that road at night again. Can't risk seeing her there, standing motionless in her bloody dress, waiting to turn around. Sometimes I wonder if I should have stopped the first time. If I could have helped her, or prevented something. But deep down, I know better. Whatever I saw by that roadside wasn't human. Wasn't alive, and it wasn't waiting for help. I check the news sometimes looking for missing persons reports from that area. Strange deaths. Unexplained disappearances. So far, nothing. But I keep checking. The desert holds on to its secrets, and some things are better left alone on dark highways. I learned that lesson on Route 50. I just hope I'm the only one who has to see her out there, standing perfectly still, staring into the endless night. I try not to think about the other drivers on that road, the ones who might be brave enough or foolish enough to stop, to walk up to that white figure by the roadside, to wait for it to turn around. But sometimes, in the darkest part of night when sleep won't come, I imagine headlights approaching on that empty highway, slowing down, stopping, boots on gravel, a voice calling out, and something turning around to answer. I never should have taken that security job at the old Riverside Medical Center. The pay was good, $20 an hour for night shifts watching an empty building. But money isn't worth what happened to me in there. What's still happening to me. The first night seemed normal enough. I walked the dark halls with my flashlight, checking doors and windows. The place had been closed for 2 years after the new hospital opened across town. Most of the equipment was gone, leaving behind empty rooms with bare walls and scattered debris. Paint peeled in long strips from the ceiling. The linoleum floors were dusty and cracked. I settled into the routine quickly. Start at the ground floor at 11 p.m., work my way up through all 4 levels, then back down again. Repeat until 7 a.m. The building creaked and groaned, but that's normal for old structures. I didn't mind the quiet. After working retail for 5 years, quiet was a nice change. Things changed on my 4th night. I was doing my 3 a.m. round when I heard it, a whisper coming from room 237 on the 2nd floor. The sound was faint, like rustling leaves. I stopped and listened. The whisper came again, clearer this time. It sounded like multiple voices speaking in unison, too quiet to make out the words. I shined my flashlight through the doorway. The beam cut through empty darkness. Just another vacant patient room, stripped bed frame, bare walls, closed bathroom door. I stepped inside, sweeping the light across every corner. Nothing moved. The whispers stopped. My heart was pounding as I checked the bathroom. Empty. I even looked under the bed frame, feeling stupid as I did it. The room was completely empty. I chalked it up to pipes or ventilation and finished my rounds. The next night, I heard the whispers again. Same room, same time. They were louder now, still unintelligible but definitely human voices. Multiple voices speaking together in hushed tones. I stood in the doorway, frozen. The sound seemed to be coming from the center of the room, but there was nothing there. "Hello?" I called out, "This is security. Anyone in here?" The whispers stopped instantly. I did a thorough search of the room again. Nothing. This continued for several nights. Each time I passed room 237, the whispers would start. Each night they got a little louder, a little clearer. I started dreading that part of my rounds. My palms would get sweaty as I approached the second floor. Sometimes I'd skip that section entirely, taking the stairs to the third floor instead. Then came the night when I heard my name. I was walking past 237, keeping my eyes straight ahead, when the whisper started up. But this time, mixed in with the indistinct murmuring, I clearly heard, "David." I stopped cold. The whispers continued, growing louder. Now I could make out more words. "David, come in. David, we're waiting." My hands shook as I pointed the flashlight beam into the room. The voices seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Multiple whispers overlapping, all saying my name, all calling me to enter. I backed away and practically ran to the stairs. I called my supervisor and made up an excuse about feeling sick. I went home early that night. I almost quit right then, but I needed the money and I felt stupid being scared of what was probably just my imagination. I went back the next night, telling myself I'd just avoid the second floor entirely. That didn't work. The whispers started reaching me even from the floor below. I'd be walking the first floor hallway and hear them drifting down from above. Dozens of voices calling my name, begging me to come upstairs. I started wearing earbuds and playing music during my shifts. That helped for a few nights. Then the whispers somehow cut through the music, becoming clearer and more insistent. The voices started following me throughout the building. They knew things about me. My full name, where I lived, my mother's name. Things from my childhood that no one else could know. David Michael Reynolds. Remember when you broke your arm at age 8? Remember the day your dog died? Remember the girl in high school? Come to us, David. Join us, David. I couldn't quit. I had bills to pay and rent due. I started taking anxiety medication before shifts. I drank energy drinks to stay alert. I only slept a few hours a day, plagued by nightmares of whispering voices. Last night, everything changed. I was doing my 3 a.m. round, music blaring in my earbuds when the power went out. The emergency lights didn't kick in. I was plunged into total darkness except for my flashlight beam. The whispers started immediately, louder than ever before, coming from every direction. Hundreds of voices calling my name, telling me to come to room 237. My flashlight beam started flickering. I ran for the stairs but got turned around in the darkness. Somehow I ended up in front of room 237. The whispers were deafening now. My flashlight died completely. In the pitch blackness, I felt cold hands grab my arms. Dozens of ice-cold fingers gripped me, pulling me forward. I screamed and fought, but there were too many. They dragged me into the room. The door slammed shut behind me. In the darkness, I felt bodies pressing in around me. Cold, silent forms pushing closer and closer. The whispers filled my head, drowning out my own thoughts. "You're home now, David. You're one of us now, David. Stay with us, David." I don't remember what happened next. I woke up on the floor of room 237 when my replacement arrived for the morning shift. He found me curled up in the corner, shivering and mumbling to myself. I quit that morning, but it doesn't matter. The whispers followed me home. They're with me all the time now, getting louder each day. They whisper to me when I'm alone. They whisper in my dreams. They tell me I belong to them now. They say I'll be back soon. And they're right. I can feel it. The pull getting stronger. Every day it gets harder to resist returning to room 237. My body aches to go back. The whispers promise the pain will stop if I just come home to them. I'm writing this as a warning. If you're offered a job at Riverside Medical Center, don't take it. No matter how good the money is, the whispers are waiting there. They're always waiting, always watching, always hungry for new voices to join their chorus. I have to go now. The whispers are getting louder. They're calling me back to room 237. And this time, I don't think I can resist them anymore. They're right. I do belong with them. We all do eventually. Listen closely. Can you hear them? They're calling your name too. The clock on my dashboard read 11:47 p.m. when I pulled into the rest stop. My bladder was about to burst, and I hadn't seen another car for the last 40 miles on that stretch of highway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the empty parking lot. Only one other vehicle sat there, a blue pickup truck parked near the entrance. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the harsh lighting. The rest stop building was a plain concrete structure with vending machines visible through dirty windows. A single security light cast yellow circles on the cracked sidewalk. My boots crunched on loose gravel as I walked to the entrance. The door creaked when I pushed it open. The linoleum floor showed years of wear, and the whole place smelled like industrial cleaner mixed with stale coffee. A guy in a leather jacket stood at the vending machine, his back to me. He didn't turn around when I walked in. The men's room door was propped open with a rubber stopper. Inside, 3 urinals lined one wall and 2 stalls took up the other side. The fluorescent light above the mirror flickered every few seconds. Water dripped steadily from one of the faucets. I went to the middle urinal and unzipped. The bathroom door squeaked behind me. Probably the guy from the vending machine coming in. I kept my eyes forward, following the unwritten rules of men's room etiquette. The dripping faucet echoed off the tile walls. My neck tingled. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't place it. The air felt heavier, colder. "James." The voice came from right beside my ear. Deep, raspy, like sandpaper on concrete. I jerked my head to the side. Nobody was there. My heart slammed against my ribs. I zipped up fast, almost catching myself in the zipper. "James." The voice again, this time from the other side. Close enough that I should have felt breath on my neck, but when I spun around, the bathroom was empty. I backed toward the door, scanning every corner. The stall doors were open, no one hiding there, no windows or other entrances. Just tile walls, porcelain fixtures, and that damn dripping faucet. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. The metal felt ice cold under my palm. "James." Behind me now, right behind me. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the main area. The vending machine guy was gone. His truck still sat in the lot, visible through the windows, but he'd vanished. The buzzing fluorescents seemed louder now. They cast harsh shadows that made every corner look deeper, darker. I walked to the entrance, moving faster with each step. The sound of my boots on the floor echoed too loudly in the empty space. The exit door wouldn't budge when I pushed it. I tried again, harder. It felt like something was holding it from the other side. My breath came in short gasps. "James." The voice filled the whole room now, bouncing off every surface. "Stay." "Fuck this," I said out loud. My voice sounded thin and weak compared to the other one. I slammed my shoulder into the door. It flew open and I stumbled into the parking lot. The blue pickup truck was gone. I hadn't heard it start up or drive away. The parking lot was completely empty except for my car. I ran to my vehicle, fumbling with my keys. The fluorescent lights above started going out one by one, plunging sections of the lot into darkness. I dropped the keys, snatched them up, and finally got the door open. The engine roared to life. I threw it in reverse and stomped the gas. Gravel sprayed as I spun the car around and accelerated toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, the rest stop disappeared into darkness. The last light went out just before I lost sight of it completely. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept checking the mirror, expecting to see headlights behind me, but the road stayed empty and dark. After 10 miles, I spotted another rest stop ahead. My bladder screamed for relief. I still hadn't actually used the bathroom, but I pressed the gas harder and drove past it. I didn't stop again until I reached the next town, 20 miles further. The 24-hour gas station had bright lights and 3 other customers inside. The teenage clerk looked up from his phone when I walked in. Normal. Safe. In the bathroom, I checked every stall before using the urinal. No voice called my name, just the hum of the overhead lights and distant pop music from the store's speakers. Back in my car, I pulled up Google Maps. I needed to find a route home that avoided that stretch of highway. The map showed the road I'd been on, but where the rest stop should have been, there was nothing marked, just empty land between exits. I zoomed in closer. Still nothing. According to the map, no rest stop existed at that location. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Same unknown number. I declined it again. A text message popped up. Answer the phone, James. The phone rang a third time. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The call ended, and another text appeared. See you next time. I turned the phone off and threw it in the back seat. The gas station's lights suddenly felt dim and insufficient. I started the car and headed for the interstate, taking the long way home. That was 3 weeks ago. I've mapped out new routes to avoid that highway completely. I don't stop at rest areas anymore, no matter how badly I need to, and I never drive alone at night. But sometimes my phone rings, always from an unknown number. I never answer. And sometimes when I'm alone in my bathroom at home, I think I hear water dripping from the faucet, even though I know it's turned off tight. Last night, I woke up at exactly 11:47 p.m. My phone was ringing. Unknown number. Before I could decline it, a text came through. Miss you, James. The bathroom misses you too. I've packed my bags. I'm leaving town tomorrow, heading west. I don't know where I'm going, but I know what I'm leaving behind. I just hope that's enough. Because last night, after that text, I got up to use the bathroom. When I flipped on the light, water was dripping from the faucet. And in the mirror, just for a second, I saw something standing behind me. It was wearing a leather jacket. I sleep in my car now. A warm bus seat shouldn't scare anyone. That's what I kept telling myself on my way home that night. But I couldn't shake what happened. I still can't. The doctors say writing it down might help. So here it is. Everything that happened at the garage that night. Just the facts. I've worked the night shift at City Transit for 6 years. My job is simple. I check the buses when they come back, make sure they're empty, log any lost items, and get them ready for the morning crew. Nothing exciting ever happens. Until 3 weeks ago. It was Tuesday, October 12th. The digital clock on the garage wall showed 11:42 p.m. when bus 247 pulled in. Jerry, the driver, waved goodbye like always. He never checks the bus himself. That's my job. I waited for the engine noise to die down. The cooling metal made those usual ticking sounds. The garage lights buzzed overhead. Everything normal. I grabbed my flashlight and clipboard, walked to the front door, and climbed aboard. Standard procedure, walk to the back, checking every row. Look for sleeping passengers, abandoned bags, anything out of place. I'd done this thousands of times. The rubber floor squeaked under my work boots. The emergency lights cast their dim glow. Halfway down the aisle, I heard it. A soft sound like fabric moving against fabric. It came from the back. I stopped, shined my light toward the rear seats. That's when I saw the figure. Someone sat in the last row, right side. Just a dark shape against the window. My flashlight beam caught what looked like the back of a head, dark hair, maybe a coat collar. Bus is closed, I called out. No response. I took a step closer. Sir, ma'am, you need to exit the vehicle. Nothing, not even a twitch. My heart started beating faster. Sweat formed on my palms, making the flashlight slippery. I thought about calling security, but they'd just tell me to handle it. That's the job. 5 rows away now. This is your last warning. I'm approaching and you need to leave. 4 rows. 3. The figure remained perfectly still. No breathing movement. No shifting. Just that dark shape against the window. 2 rows away, my flashlight caught something strange. The edges of the figure looked wrong. Fuzzy. Like heat waves rising from hot pavement. 1 row left. My hands shook. The beam of light danced across the back seat. Empty. I blinked hard. Looked again. The seat was completely empty, but something else wasn't right. I reached out, touched the vinyl seat cover. Warm. Not just warm. Hot. Like someone had been sitting there for hours. My fingers jerked back. The warmth wasn't natural. Bus seats cool down fast. We were in October, nights got cold. This felt like body heat, but stronger. Wrong. I stumbled backward, nearly fell. My flashlight beam swept across the windows, the ceiling, the other seats. All empty. The bus felt different now. Heavier. The air seemed thick. I ran. Didn't even try to hide it. Just turned and sprinted down the aisle. My boots hammered against the floor. The front door seemed miles away. I burst out into the garage, gasping. Other buses sat in their lanes, dark and quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't go back in, not alone. I called Mike, the night security guard. My voice shook when I explained. He didn't laugh. Mike's worked here 20 years. He's seen things too. We went back together. Mike had his hand on his pepper spray. Stupid against whatever this was, but it made us feel better. The bus looked ordinary now. We checked every seat. The back row had cooled to normal temperature. No sign anyone or anything had been there. I filed my report. Bus 247 cleared, no incidents. What else could I write? Nobody believes ghost stories, but it wasn't over. The next night, Bus 247 came in at the same time. I almost called in sick, but I needed the job. Everything seemed normal at first. Same procedure, same squeaky floor, same emergency lights. Halfway down the aisle, my flashlight caught movement in the back. My throat closed up. The figure sat in the exact same spot. Dark shape, no features, edges blurring like a mirage. This time I didn't say anything, didn't move closer, just watched. It disappeared between one blink and the next. Gone. The seat glowed with that unnatural heat again. This happened 5 more times that week. Always bus 247. Always the last row, right side. Always the same figure that vanished when I got close, leaving that haunting warmth behind. I started documenting everything. Times, temperatures, weather conditions. The seat always measured 98. 7 degrees Fahrenheit right after the figure disappeared. Exactly human body temperature. The heat lingered for exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds each time before cooling to normal. I searched through old records. Bus 247's history showed nothing unusual. No accidents, no deaths, no missing persons last seen boarding it. But something else caught my attention. The driver, Jerry? He'd been assigned to this route for exactly 3 weeks, right when it all started. I waited for him the next night. Hey, Jerry. Any weird experiences on your route lately? He stiffened. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Like what? Like someone sitting in the back who disappears? His face went pale. You've seen it too? We talked for hours. Jerry had noticed it first. 3 weeks ago, a passenger got on at the Miller Street stop, paid the fare, walked to the back. Jerry didn't get a good look at their face. End of the line. The passenger hadn't gotten off. Jerry called back to them, got no response. When he turned around in his seat to look, the figure vanished. But the seat stayed warm. Every night since then, same thing. Same stop, same seat, same disappearance. We decided to investigate. The next night, I rode along on Jerry's route. We hit Miller Street at 10:47 p.m. The stop was empty, no one waiting. But the bus doors opened on their own. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, heavy ones. The fare box chimed, registering payment, but no one was there. We watched in the rearview mirror as the back seat cushion compressed, like someone sitting down, but nothing visible. 7 minutes later, the impression vanished. The seat radiated that familiar heat. We repeated this experiment for a week. Same results every time. We took videos, but nothing showed up on camera. Just an empty seat that got hot for no reason. I couldn't sleep anymore. Spent my days researching similar cases. Found nothing exact, but lots of stories about ghost passengers on public transport. Most people treated them like urban legends. Then Jerry didn't show up for his shift. Called in sick. The replacement driver reported no incidents. Next day, same thing. Third day, we got the news. Jerry had died in his sleep. Heart attack, they said. He was only 42. That night, bus 247 pulled in with its replacement driver. I almost didn't check it, but I had to know. The figure sat in the back, same as always. But something had changed. Now I could see a face in the darkness. Jerry's face. He smiled at me. A sad smile, then faded away. The seat felt warm when I touched it. One last time. Bus 247 never showed another ghost passenger after that. The replacement driver never reported anything strange. Life went back to normal, or what passes for normal when you know what I know. I still work the night shift, still check every bus, every seat, but now I pay special attention to the warm ones. Sometimes a seat being warm just means someone sat there recently. Natural body heat that fades quickly. Normal. But sometimes that heat lingers longer than it should. And on those nights, I remember Jerry, and the figure that rode his bus, and all the things we don't understand about this world. I've never told this story before now. Didn't want to sound crazy, but it happened. Every word is true. I have the temperature readings to prove it, for whatever that's worth. The doctors say writing it down will help me process everything. Maybe they're right, but that's not why I'm sharing it. I'm sharing it because last night, on bus 186, I felt that familiar warmth again. Different bus, different seat, but the same impossible heat. I didn't look for a figure this time. Didn't need to. Just filed my report. Bus cleared. No incidents. But I'm watching the driver of bus 186 now, making sure they stay healthy, making sure they stay alive. Because whatever rides our buses after midnight, whatever leaves those warm seats behind, I don't think it's finished. And I don't think Jerry was its first passenger, or its last. The empty swing moved back and forth in the morning air. The kid just stood there, his hand on the chain, pushing it slightly. Something wasn't right. I've seen plenty of kids in this park over my morning walks, but never like this. Never this still. Never this quiet. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my own business. But I didn't. And that's why I'm writing this down now, trying to make sense of what happened after. I'm a regular at Jefferson Park. Every morning at 7:30 I walk the loop around the playground, past the duck pond and back to my apartment. It helps clear my head before work. I'm an accountant. Numbers make sense. They add up. What I saw that morning didn't add up. It was Tuesday, October 12th. The air was cold enough to see my breath. Fallen leaves covered the ground, wet from the previous night's rain. The park was empty, except for me and the boy. He looked about 10 years old, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie. His sneakers were muddy. He didn't wear a jacket despite the cold. The swing creaked as he pushed it. Back and forth, back and forth. Slow, steady movements. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground. I stopped walking and watched him for a minute. He didn't look up. He didn't move from his spot. Just kept pushing that empty swing. My stomach tightened. Something about the scene felt wrong. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he needed help. I changed course and walked toward him. "Hey, buddy. You okay?" I called out when I was about 20 feet away. He stopped pushing the swing. It continued moving on its own, slower and slower. He turned his head toward me. His face was blank. No fear, no surprise, no anything. Just empty eyes staring at me. The swing came to a stop. The boy let go of the chain. He turned and walked away, his steps steady and purposeful. I watched him head toward the park entrance on Mason Street. He didn't look back. I stood there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. The swing hung motionless now. The chains didn't make a sound. I looked around the park, but there were no parents in sight. No one watching. just me and the empty playground. I finished my walk and went to work. The numbers on my spreadsheets kept blurring. I couldn't focus. That blank stare kept popping into my head. I made 3 calculation errors that morning. That never happens. The next day, I almost skipped my walk. Something about the whole thing made me uneasy. But routine is routine, so I laced up my running shoes and headed out. 7:30 a.m. Same cold morning, same wet leaves, same empty park, same boy. He stood in the exact same spot, pushing the same swing. Same gray hoodie, same muddy sneakers, same slow, steady movement. Back and forth, back and forth. I stopped in my tracks. My heart beat faster. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal kid behavior. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. The image came out blurry, but you could make out his shape by the swing set. I walked closer, more cautious this time. "Hey, I saw you here yesterday. Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The same sequence played out. He stopped pushing. The swing slowed down. He turned. Those empty eyes fixed on me. No expression. He walked away. Same direction as yesterday. Same steady pace. I followed him this time, keeping my distance. He walked down Mason Street, turned right on Oak Avenue, and headed toward the old industrial district. I lost sight of him when he turned down an alley between 2 abandoned warehouses. By the time I reached the alley, he was gone. Both ends were blocked by chain-link fences. The only doors were padlocked. No broken windows within reach. Nowhere he could have gone. My hands shook as I walked to work. I made 6 calculation errors that day. The next morning, I brought my phone ready to record. 7:30 a.m. The boy was there. Same position, same actions. I hit record and walked closer. The video shows exactly what I saw the previous days. The steady pushing, the blank stare, the walk away. What it doesn't show is how cold it got when I approached him. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. My phone battery died immediately after he walked away, even though it had been at 98%. I followed him again. Same route, same alley, same disappearance. I called the police that afternoon, explained the situation. They took a report but didn't seem concerned. Kids play in parks. Kids walk home. Nothing illegal about that. The video, my phone wouldn't turn on to show them. Day 4. I arrived at 7:15 a.m. and hid behind a tree near the swing set. I needed to see where he came from. At exactly 7:30 he appeared, not walked up, not arrived. One moment the swing was empty, the next he stood beside it, hand on the chain, pushing. I felt sick to my stomach. I watched him for 30 minutes. He never changed his rhythm, never looked around, never stopped pushing, until I stepped out from behind the tree. The same sequence followed: stop, turn, stare, walk. This time I didn't follow. I spent that night researching missing children in the area. Nothing matched his description. No recent cases. No old ones that fit. I looked up the history of the park. No deaths reported, no accidents, nothing unusual at all. Day 5. I brought a co-worker, Dave, with me. Told him I needed someone else to see this. We arrived at 7:15 a.m. and waited. 7:30 a.m. The boy appeared. "Holy shit," Dave whispered. "Where did he come from?" We watched for 5 minutes before approaching. The temperature dropped. Dave's phone died. The boy went through his routine. Stop, turn, stare, walk. Dave called in sick that day. He hasn't been back to work since. I stopped going to the park after that, changed my morning routine, started walking on the treadmill at home. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I went back. 7:30 a.m. The boy wasn't there. The swing moved, though. Back and forth, back and forth. Slow and steady. No wind that morning. I walked closer. The temperature dropped. My phone died. On the seat of the swing, pressed into the black rubber, was a perfect handprint. Too small to be an adult's. Just the right size for a 10-year-old boy. I reached out to touch it. The rubber was ice cold. The next day, they closed the park for renovations. The old playground equipment was removed, including the swing set. A construction worker found something when they dug up the foundation for the new equipment. Small bones. Very old. And a gray hoodie, barely recognizable after years in the ground. The police reopened a cold case from 1985. A missing 10-year-old boy, last seen walking home from school. He usually cut through Jefferson Park. They never found out what happened to him. But every morning at 7:30 I think about that empty swing moving back and forth, and those blank eyes staring at nothing. I work from home now. Numbers still make sense. They still add up. But some things in this world don't add up, and I've learned to live with that. Sometimes late at night I hear the creak of a swing outside my window. I don't look. I don't want to know if he's found me. I don't want to see those eyes again. Back and forth. Back and forth. I keep my blinds closed at 7:30 a.m. I don't sleep well anymore. Not since that night 3 weeks ago. I keep the lights on now. All of them. The power bill will be insane. But I don't care. The alternative is worse. Much worse. I've moved my bed to the center of the room, away from any walls or corners where something could hide. Where it could hide. It started during my annual spring cleaning. My mom had been nagging me for months to clear out my old stuff from her basement. "David, you're 32. "I'm not running a storage facility," she'd said. She was right. So I drove over one Saturday morning and started going through the dusty cardboard boxes of my childhood. The work was straightforward. Most stuff went straight into garbage bags. Old school papers, broken action figures, tangled headphones. Some things I set aside to keep. My baseball card collection, a few yearbooks, my dad's old watch. Then I found the car. It was at the bottom of a box labeled David, ages 8-10. A red 1967 Mustang die-cast model about 6 inches long. The paint was chipped in places, showing the metal underneath. One of the doors didn't close properly anymore, but seeing it hit me with a wave of memories. This had been my constant companion for nearly 2 years of my childhood. I'd take it everywhere, to school, to the park, even to bed sometimes. My grandfather had given it to me for my 8th birthday, just a few months before he died. "This is special," he'd said, his liver-spotted hands pressing it into my palm. "Take good care of it." I remember being slightly disappointed. I'd wanted the new Nintendo game everyone at school was talking about, but something about the way he'd looked at me made me treasure it. The car had worked on batteries back then, with little headlights that would glow and an engine that made a soft purring sound, but those features had died years ago. Now it was just a silent piece of metal and plastic. I placed it on my desk when I got home, planning to clean it up sometime. 3 nights later, I jolted awake at 3:17 a.m. The red numbers on my alarm clock burned in the darkness. Something had woken me, but I wasn't sure what. Then I heard it. A soft scraping sound like metal on wood. It came from the direction of my desk. I lay perfectly still, holding my breath. The sound came again. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. My mind raced through possibilities. A mouse? The house settling? The heating system? But I knew those sounds. This was different. The scraping stopped. Now there was a new sound. Tiny clicks, like miniature footsteps on my hardwood floor. They were moving, getting closer to my bed. My hand inched toward the lamp on my nightstand. The clicks stopped. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my ears. My fingers found the switch. Click. Light flooded the room. And there it was. The Mustang, sitting perfectly still at the foot of my bed. Its front end was pointed directly at my face, like it was staring at me. But that was impossible. I'd left it on my desk, a good 15 feet away. I remember specifically placing it next to my laptop before going to bed. I hadn't touched it since. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The car didn't move. It just sat there, its chrome bumper reflecting the lamplight. I reached for my phone, took a picture. I needed proof I wasn't imagining this. Minutes passed. I didn't blink. Neither did the car. Finally, I swung my legs out of bed, keeping my eyes locked on the toy. With shaking hands, I picked it up. It felt cold, much colder than it should have been in my warm room. I walked to my desk and set it down exactly where it had been before. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. When morning came, I convinced myself I'd been dreaming. Had to have been dreaming. I went to work, spent the day staring at spreadsheets trying to forget about it. That night I made sure the car was secure on my desk before going to bed. I even took a picture with my phone to document its position. Sleep came slowly, but eventually I drifted off. The sound of metal grinding against metal ripped me from sleep. My eyes snapped open to darkness. The grinding continued, accompanied by a high-pitched whine that made my teeth hurt. It was coming from right beside my head. I turned slowly to my right. 2 tiny pinpricks of light glowed in the darkness, the car's headlights. They weren't the warm yellow I remembered from childhood. They were a sickly green, casting a pale glow on my pillow. The engine sound grew louder. The car was running, but there were no batteries. There couldn't be batteries. I'd checked. I screamed and jerked away, falling out of bed onto the floor. I scrambled for the light switch, my fingers slipping on the wall in panic. Light flooded the room. The car sat on my pillow, its front end cocked slightly to one side like a dog's head. The headlights were dark now, but I'd seen them. I knew I'd seen them. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I took more pictures. I needed evidence, needed to prove to myself this was real. The car looked innocent in the photos, just a toy sitting on a pillow. But I knew better. I grabbed it, it was ice cold again, and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I pushed my heavy office chair against the drawer for good measure. Sleep was out of the question. The next day I called in sick to work. I spent hours researching haunted objects online. Most of it was obviously fake, but some stories had a ring of truth that made my skin crawl. I found a forum dedicated to cursed items, posted my story. Most responses were jokes or skepticism, but one person messaged me privately. "Your grandfather," they wrote. "Where did he get the car?" I realized I didn't know. I called my mom. "Mom, do you remember that toy car Grandpa gave me? The red Mustang?" "Oh yes," she said. "He was so insistent about giving it to you. Wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Why? Do you know where he got it?" A pause. "No, but there was something strange about that. He showed up with it the day after your grandmother died. Said he'd found it in an antique shop. But your father swore he'd seen that exact car in your grandfather's house when he was a boy, 30 years earlier. They had a big fight about it." My mouth went dry. "What kind of fight?" "Your father said the car was evil, that it moved on its own at night. Your grandfather got very angry, said your father was trying to ruin your birthday. They barely spoke after that, right up until your grandfather passed." I hung up soon after. My head was spinning. When night fell, I couldn't stand to be in the same house as the car. I packed a bag and checked into a motel, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, sitting there in my desk drawer, waiting. After 3 nights at the motel, I knew I had to go back, had to deal with this. I returned home just before midnight. The house felt different, charged somehow like the air before a storm. The office chair was still pressed against my desk drawer. I moved it aside slowly. The drawer was empty. A soft purring sound came from behind me. I turned. The car sat in the center of my bed, engine running, headlights blazing that sickly green. As I watched, it rolled forward an inch. Then another. My grandfather's last words to me came flooding back. "This is special. Take good care of it." There had been something in his eyes when he said it. Desperation? Relief? The car rolled forward again. I understood now. He hadn't given me a gift. He'd passed on a burden. That was 3 weeks ago. The car follows me now. Every night, no matter where I hide it, it appears somewhere near me by morning. I've tried destroying it. Hammers bounce off it. Saws can't scratch it. Even fire doesn't leave a mark. Last night, I got an email from that person on the forum. They'd done some research. Apparently there are records of a red Mustang die-cast toy going back to the 1940s. Always the same description. Always passed down through families. Always moving at night. They found something else too. In every family that's owned it, the person who passes the car on dies within a month of giving it away. Every time. Grandpa died 3 weeks after my birthday. I've started looking for antique shops. Maybe I can find someone to pass it on to. But every time I think about doing that, I remember the look in my grandfather's eyes, the desperation, the guilt. For now, the car sits on my nightstand, its chrome bumper gleaming in the lamplight. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, I hear its engine start to purr. I don't sleep much anymore, but at least I'm still alive. I need to write this down while it's fresh. Maybe someone can make sense of what happened to me last night at the Parkview Hotel. I've checked my phone records, talked to the staff, even called the police. None of it adds up. I arrived at the Parkview around 6 p.m. yesterday. Business trip to Cincinnati, nothing special. The hotel stood on a corner downtown, one of those old brick buildings from the 1920s. Brass fixtures, dark wood paneling, high ceilings. The lobby smelled like furniture polish and old carpet. The front desk clerk, Sarah, according to her name tag, handed me the key to room 412. "Fourth floor, end of the hall," she said. Her fingers were ice cold when they brushed mine. The elevator creaked all the way up. When I stepped out, the hallway stretched ahead, empty and silent. Dark red carpet, wallpaper with a faded pattern. The kind of place that was probably fancy 50 years ago. Something felt off the moment I opened the door to 412. The room was clean, normal looking. Queen bed with a brown bedspread, TV on the dresser, desk by the window, but the proportions seemed wrong somehow. Like the walls weren't quite at right angles, or the ceiling was slightly too high. I blinked hard, told myself I was being stupid. I set my laptop on the desk and started unpacking. The clothes went into the dresser drawers, which stuck slightly when I pulled them out. My phone buzzed. Email from a client. I sat down to respond. The room felt colder than it should. I checked the thermostat. 72 degrees. But the air had a clammy feel that made the hair on my arm stand up. When I walked to the bathroom, my footsteps sounded hollow on the carpet like there was empty space underneath. The bathroom mirror showed dark spots in the corners, where the silver backing had started to peel. My reflection looked normal, but something about the angle seemed wrong, like I was looking at myself from slightly to the side even though I stood directly in front. I splashed some water on my face. At 7:15, the room phone rang, the old-fashioned kind with an actual bell. I picked it up. "Mr. Davidson, this is the front desk. Just calling with your requested 6 a.m. wake-up call confirmation." "I didn't request a wake-up call," I said. A pause. "We have it here in the system. Room 412, 6 a.m. wake-up. There must be a mistake. I don't need one. I'll remove it, sir. Sorry for the confusion." The line clicked dead. I went back to my email but couldn't focus. The room felt bigger somehow, the corners further away than they should be. The wall clock ticked too loudly. Around 8:30, I heard voices in the hallway. Normal hotel noise, people heading to dinner or whatever. But they sounded distorted, like they were coming through water. When I opened my door to check, the hall was empty. I needed food. The restaurant downstairs was closed, so I walked a few blocks to a diner. Burger and fries, coffee, normal stuff. But the whole time, I felt off balance, like the ground wasn't quite level. Back at the hotel by 10. The lobby was empty except for a different desk clerk, an older guy with gray hair. He nodded as I walked past. The elevator seemed to take longer going up than it had coming down. When the doors opened, the hallway lights flickered. Just for a second, but enough to make my stomach clench. I took a shower, trying to shake off the weird feeling. The water pressure kept changing, surging, then dropping to a trickle. The pipes made grinding noises behind the walls. 11:45 p.m. I was in bed half watching a rerun of The Office on TV. That's when I heard it. A loud bang from the room next door. 4:14, like someone had slammed into the wall. Then another bang. And another. A frantic rhythm like someone pounding with both fists. The whole wall shook. I sat up, heart hammering. The banging got louder, faster. Now it sounded like multiple people hitting the wall. The noise was deafening. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the front desk. But before I could, the banging stopped. Complete silence. My hands shook as I dialed. Front desk. This is room 412. There's some kind of disturbance next door. Really loud banging. Next door? Room 414? Yes. Sir, that room has been vacant for several days. No one has checked in there. My mouth went dry. I heard banging. Lots of it. Just now. I'll send security to check. He hung up. I pulled on pants and a t-shirt, opened my door just as a security guard came down the hall. Tall guy, black uniform. You reported noise from 414? He asked. I nodded. He used his master key to open the door. The room was dark, perfectly empty. Beds made, no luggage, nothing out of place. The guard checked the bathroom, closet, everywhere someone could hide. Nothing. Room's been empty since Monday, he said. Sometimes the old pipes make noise. Probably what you heard. But those weren't pipe noises. I knew what I'd heard. Back in my room, I couldn't sleep. The wall clock showed 12:30. No, 12:15. I could have sworn it said 12:30 a moment ago. The TV turned itself on. Static. I hit the power button. Nothing. Unplugged it. The static continued for 3 more seconds before cutting out. The room felt huge now, the walls impossibly far apart. The ceiling had to be 20 feet high. But when I looked directly at any spot, the dimensions snapped back to normal. 1 a.m. The phone rang again. Your wake-up call is confirmed for 6 a.m., Mr. Davidson. I didn't request a wake-up call, I told you that earlier. Our records show the request was made at check-in. No. I've said twice now I don't want a wake-up call. Very well, sir, I'll remove it again. Click. My phone showed no service now. The Wi-Fi was gone too. The room felt like a void, disconnected from the rest of the world. The banging started again next door, slower this time, deliberate, like something testing the wall between us. I grabbed my keys and wallet. I didn't care about my luggage. I had to get out. The hallway light flickered as I stepped out. The elevator didn't respond when I pushed the button. I took the stairs, 4 flights down. But the stairwell kept going. 5 flights, 6, 7. The numbers on the doors stopped making sense. 427P. I ran faster. My footsteps echoed wrong, like I was running up instead of down. The air got thicker, harder to breathe. Finally, the lobby. Empty. No desk clerk. The front doors were locked. I heard footsteps behind me. Turned to see Sarah, the clerk from check-in. Checking out early, Mr. Davidson? Let me out. My voice shook. But you just checked in. She smiled. Her teeth looked wrong. Too many at odd angles. The room. Something's wrong with it. Room 412 has always been perfectly normal. She stepped closer. Her movements were jerky like a bad video frame rate. Though some guests do find it adjusting. I backed away. Her face flickered. Young, old, rotting, fresh, 1,000 variations in seconds. Your wake-up call is still scheduled for 6 a.m. Her voice came from everywhere at once. I ran. Through the service entrance, into the kitchen. Found a door marked exit. Burst out into the alley. Cold night air. Normal city sounds. I ran 6 blocks before stopping. My phone worked again. 3:47 a.m. I called a Uber, went to another hotel across town. This morning I went back for my stuff. Different clerk at the desk, a young guy who looked completely normal. Said they had no record of my stay. No Sarah on staff. Room 4 and 12 was being renovated. Had been for weeks. I saw my reflection in the lobby mirror as I left. For a split second, it moved wrong, like it was a fraction of a second behind me. I'm heading home now, but I keep checking the time, worried about 6 a.m. And sometimes when it's quiet, I hear something banging, very faintly, like it's coming from very far away, or getting closer. The next time I looked in the bathroom mirror, I noticed dark spots spreading in the corners, just like in room 412. I'm not sure my reflection is lining up properly anymore, and my phone keeps showing wake-up call scheduled 6 a.m., no matter how many times I delete it. I think room 412 followed me home.